Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Becky Robinson, and I am so thrilled that you have joined us for this very special learning event today with my friend Karen. We will be getting started in a few minutes as you are coming in, though we'd like to invite you to go ahead and let us know in the chat where you're calling in from today. And we hope that the chat will be a great place for you to connect in community with those who are on today's event. And please feel free at any point during today's event to go ahead and post your questions, your comments, your feedback. We would love to hear from you. We want to create an inclusive environment here at Weaving Influence for our event. So one of the things I want to let you know is there are closed captions available in the bottom of your Zoom panel. Should you need those, you can also select various languages if that would be helpful to you. I just noticed that earlier today. So if you need those closed captions in English or in another language, those are available in the bottom of your Zoom panel. So welcome to, uh, let's see, Tracy in Ashland, Dawn in Elkton, Maryland, Anne is in London, Diane in Tennessee. It looks like a couple of callers in Tennessee. And hello to Crystal in Lubbock, Texas. Thanks for those of you who are letting us know where you're calling in from. In case you're curious, you might notice that we are recording today's event, and this recording will be available after the event in case you would like to share it with any of your friends, colleagues, family, whomever might benefit from it. I am going to introduce my friend Karen Marginot in just a moment, but before I do, we wanted to take a moment to recognize that, especially here in the United States, there's been a lot of heavy news recently, and today is the 24th anniversary of the attacks on the United States on September 11th. And so, for those who are here in the United States with us, you may be carrying some very heavy feelings today after yesterday's shootings or with the remembrance of 9/11. Also, yesterday was National Suicide Prevention Awareness Day. This happens to be National Recovery Month. So we just wanted to take a moment to let you know that we are feeling the weight of the day. Where you are is okay, and we're thrilled that you've chosen to connect with this event because one of the things that Karen's journey illustrates is the importance of spirituality and how spirituality can be an outside presence to help guide us to greater health. So we hope that you'll lean into those messages with us today. Karen, let me just stop and say hi. How are you?
Oh, hi, Becky. Thank you. And I am thrilled to be here and grateful that folks have made the time to join us today for this conversation. I'm really excited about this.
Me too. Well, let me tell a little bit of background on Karen. You might see on her screen or behind my chair Karen's book. Karen is the author of The Bad Girls Club, Promises of a Spirituality-Based Recovery. And I'm super excited for this conversation for a number of reasons, but one of the reasons is because this is such a beautiful and helpful book. And I was thrilled to be able to read it, and I'm thrilled to be able to discuss it with you today, Karen. A couple more things about Karen. She is based in the Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. Is that right?
That is correct.
And having left her corporate career, Karen is now a coach and workshop designer who brings transformational experiences to women. And we are going to be talking a lot about transformation today. Karen is a passionate advocate for recovery in all forms. And she wants to help women connect with their best work in a joyful way. One of the things I admire about Karen and the way she's written her memoir is that she is so authentic and real in sharing her life's journey. And that helps other people, I think, women especially, to be able to break out of their own shame, own their own stories, and find healing and reclaim their voices. So through her book, through her speaking, through her workshops, through her coaching, Karen is helping women to rewrite their stories with intention, strength, and joy. So we would love to pause at this moment to find out what part of Karen's message especially led you to sign up for today's event. So I have a poll I would love to get your feedback on. And the poll says this: what brought you to today's conversation? Did you come because you are exploring healthier ways to cope and care for yourself? Did you come because you want to explore how recovery can strengthen leadership? Did you come because you're seeking ways to build resilience and well being? Are you ready to release shame and embrace joy? Or are you here to be inspired by a story of transformation? And we will give you a moment to answer the poll, and then we will share those results. Karen, you and I talked about before the webinar that I may use these responses to shape the questions that we cover.
Yes, I think that's important. We really want to be able to talk to and speak to the things that people brought today. What brought them here and what's of most interest. Absolutely.
Well, and just a quick note that I noticed after I shouted out where people were from, that we have a caller in the Philippines, one in Scotland, one in Turks and Caicos, and another in Bristol, UK. So a truly international group of people with us today, which is incredible.
Wonderful.
So let's get a look at the poll. There is a wide range of answers on this poll.
Hmm.
Um, and it looks like the most popular topics today are building resilience and well-being, inspiration from a story of transformation, and exploring healthier ways to cope and care for yourself. So, as we start, Karen, I mentioned at the top of the hour that this is National Recovery Month. And I know that you have been a woman in recovery for 40 years.
Yeah.
So can you tell us, what does National Recovery Month mean to you? And why is it so important for people to be aware of this month?
Yeah, it is important for a number of reasons, Becky. One is that when I was invited through a series of circumstances to address my own addictions and alcoholism and begin a path of recovery, there was a lot of hush hush about it. It was 1985. I was directed not to tell anybody, especially at my workplace, what was going on. I had to have cover stories. There was a lot of shame and taboo around it, right? And I think that shame and taboo still exists to some degree today, although we have really, really reduced a lot of that over the years. We've seen celebrities come out and talk about their own recovery paths. The more we talk about it, like anything else, the more we normalize it and can make recovery accessible. So, National Recovery Month to me is an acknowledgement that yes, it is okay to talk about it. It is okay to reach out. It is okay to think about recovery and what that means for me in my life. So I'm super happy to see this.
Well, and I like that National Recovery Month is encompassing a wide range of recovering from
Yes.
things. And one thing I noticed in your book, Karen, is that you mention, your own particular addictions, but you also talk about other challenges that people might be experiencing. So I wonder, for those who are here, if you could list some of those, and potentially there are points of resonance that folks on the call can identify with.
Oh, absolutely. I'm going to say yes. And my recovery started with alcoholism and drug addiction, but it did not end there. Like, I was also addicted to cigarettes. It was the 70s and the 80s. Everybody smoked back then. I have battled with trying to get my arms around shopping, money, phone addiction, how much time I spend doom scrolling, especially in the evening, escaping through television, escaping with relationships, becoming, in a deeply obsessive kind of relationship, thinking this is the answer. So for me, um, addiction really is seeking something outside of myself to solve something that is going wrong within me, with it, and avoiding looking at myself, avoiding seeking out a personal sense of spirituality, right? And when those kinds of dependencies and when those kinds of obsessions, can be food, it can be sex, it can be phones, it can be power. We're seeing a lot of power addiction these days, money, whatever it is that feels good on the short term. And if we continue to go down that path and get obsessive about it, it can actually harm our lives. It can ruin our relationships. It can erode our ability to be honest, it really has wide implications for every area of our life.
Thank you so much for outlining those. And I see someone in the chat is adding a couple of other ideas. That was definitely something that stood out to me, Karen. Early on in the book, you mentioned that once you had become sober from alcohol and drugs, you still found yourself in this pattern between gaining your significance from your work,
Yes.
gaining your significance from relationships. And both of those, I think, are things that many of us can identify with.
Yeah.
I do want to pick up on something that you said because for me, a very pivotal moment in the book was that moment in which you had someone at your workplace take you aside, ask you if you had a problem, and then help you get into a rehab program. And I'm curious about what that was like for you as a young person in your career. And then also, once you were recovered, how that transformed the way that you worked with the people that you led across your career.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I am eternally grateful to Betsy. She was my manager, and she is the one that recognized right away what was happening with me. I mean, and it was fairly obvious anyway. I wasn't fooling anybody. Um, Thought I was, but she took a huge risk, right? And she crossed over that line of hard, rigid definitions of what professionalism is. And she engaged with me on a very human scale, right? She kind of broke through that wall and she reached out and said, "Look, I see you." And she let me know that she really saw me, but she did it with such kindness and such an absence of judgment that it gave me a moment where I could hear what she had to say. And she went a step further and shared that she too had been approached by her manager many years prior who saw her. And now it was her turn to give that back. And it was such a human moment for both of us. I'm sure in looking back and having kind of walked her path a little bit myself, it's very vulnerable to break that through that definition of rigid professionalism and say, I'm going to take a risk here and see you. You don't know how the other person's going to receive it. Are they going to be angry? Are they going to feel violated? Are they going to feel embarrassed? I felt all those things. But it she did it with such grace that she held the space for me to become willing to listen to what she had to say. And then I too learned from her example and have been able to be open to moments where I could be of service to someone else. And that's let me know a couple things. One, no matter where we are in life, right? We're all human. We're having a human experience. So we could be, behind a desk, we could be at opposite ends of a huge conference room table, we could be in positions of power, but in the end, we're all having a human experience here, right? And so it's okay to embrace that and acknowledge that. And secondly, that is where I've learned that none of what I went through was wasted time. It has all come back to be of service to other people, especially women, and opening those doors and helping them understand that they're not alone, that I have done those things, I have felt that way, I have seen these things too, and I'm going to stand at your side as if you decide to walk through this journey.
Yeah, that is so amazing and powerful. And something that stood out to me from that exchange, and forgive me if I get the details wrong, we can correct them. But if I remember correctly, you got to the airport, you were heading to Charlotte, North Carolina to go to rehab. And the person who was bringing you, I think it was the manager, handed you a copy of the big book,
Yes.
the Alcoholics Anonymous book, and inscribed it to you.
Yes.
Can you share with those who are with us today what that inscription said and what it meant to you?
Oh my gosh, yes. I'm looking to see, oh, it's in my other room. I should have it here. It was an inscription that said, "Karen, today is the first day of your life." And she put the date on it too, which was beautiful. And it was. And I was 23. I was facing the fact that I'd kind of failed in every area of my life. I felt terribly ashamed. I was leaving this, terrible boyfriend that I had had, but my heart was breaking, right? Because there was no social media back in those days, no phones. So I basically just disappeared, right? And I was feeling guilty and terrible. So all I was feeling was loss. All I was feeling was loss and failure. And the words then felt kind of like, a cliche. It was like, oh, she's just saying that to make me feel better. I had no idea how very true those words were. And I've gone back again and again and reread those. And it has been powerful because at any moment, if I feel like I'm failing again, and I've had moments where I feel like, I'm not doing the right thing, this didn't work out the way I'd planned, I can go back and remember that and just say, oh, yeah, well, today could be the very first day of this next phase of my life. And it brings me a lot of hope and a lot of joy.
That is powerful. Thank you. So, I want to reflect also something that I found astounding about that moment in your journey, Karen, was that you didn't really go willingly to give up alcohol. You were willing to give up the harder stuff, but in your mind, you were thinking, okay, I'm going to go to rehab, but I'm going to keep drinking. So, talk to us about what happened
Oh, yeah.
that allowed you to transform to, total physical sobriety
Yeah.
from substances. Like, what exactly went on? And yeah, tell us about that part of your journey.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. For those who have not read my book or maybe not have made it to this point, the way I got sober was very odd. It was I got into this job basically because of my astrology sign. And I was picked because the woman who placed me in the job only placed people based on their astrology sign. And there were two people that I interviewed with, and I ended up with the one I did not think I would get the job with. So I'm in rehab, absolutely thinking, who gives up drinking at 23? That's crazy. I haven't even started. And um, it dawned on me as the fog lifted, took a little while for the fog to lift. And I knew, okay, drugs are bad. You can go to jail for drugs, but who gives up drinking? But the fog's lifting. And I started thinking about all the circumstances that led up to me being able to have this moment where I had a choice, right? And I thought, those circumstances are never going to come together again. This is a once in a lifetime shot. And as miserable as this is probably going to be, because who doesn't drink? How do you have fun? I'm never going to have fun again. I'm never going to go to concerts. I'm never going to, and all I could think of was what I'm not going to be able to do. This may never happen again, and I'm not going to be lucky enough to die. I'm going to be one of those women that just gets stuck, and I'm not going to be able to get back in to recovery, and I'm not going to be able to get out of this life. So I'm just going to live a life being miserable, and I'm going to get sicker and sicker and sicker year after year, and I'm going to be one of those bar hags, in their mid to late 60s and 70s, teeth falling out, hair falling out, thinking I'm hot because I'm delusional at this point, hitting on 30-year-olds, buy me a beer. And I was like, that's my future. If I don't get this done and surrender to this, that's going to be my life. So I kind of scared myself into just taking this one day at a time.
Amazing. Let's talk about the spirituality side, Karen, because the subtitle of your book brings that in. And I was intrigued by
Mhm.
watching the transformation that you describe in the book from being someone who wasn't really sure about God
Right.
to finding your own definition of spirituality and that fueling your transformative recovery. So I would love to hear you share with our attendees today about that part of your journey.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So in 1985, when I was 23 and stumbling into, rehab and 12-step meetings, the 12-step model really was the only model available at that time. There had not been a lot of, research into alcoholism and addiction yet. It was the height of the war on drugs under the Reagan administration. And so it was that or nothing, right? And I tried the nothing, and I really couldn't go more than 6 hours without putting something in my system. So I knew the nothing part failed. I needed something, 12 steps, right? And I walked into these meetings, and back in the day, they used to always hang them tapestry of the 12 or a sign with the 12 steps and the 12 traditions at the front of the meeting room. And there's the word God all over it. And I thought, oh, God, I'm never going to be able to do this. I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm going to fail because I can't do the God thing. I can't do the God thing. I grew up in a very nice family. Went to Catholic schools, went to Catholic church, and the whole bit. And on about the time I was 12, I decided that I had a lot of moral and ethical questions around what was happening with organized religion, and I kind of stopped. That was the end of the road for me. And so I did not, I equated spirituality with religion. And I thought you can't have one without the other, and I can't do religion, so I'm kind of stuck here. And it wasn't until, I had a counselor and then my sponsor, it was a woman who had been sober a little bit longer than me, sat me down and said, you know what? You can decide whatever that is for you. You can choose whatever works for you. And if the God word bothers you, you don't have to even call it God. You can call it something else. You can use meetings or other people as a higher power, but find a place to get started. So all we ask you to do is to be willing to experiment and to be willing to try on different things. And I am a writer at heart, and writers like to research a lot of stuff. So I went on a 2-year research project. I went and explored all kinds of things, and I went to every church, synagogue, temple in the area, went to services, talked to people, found my way to a yoga ashram in Virginia called Yogaville, that has a beautiful shrine down there called the Lotus Shrine, which has chapels for just about every major religion on the planet. And I just learned. And I learned and I read and I meditated. I learned how to meditate, and I started talking and I started asking myself questions. And slowly over time, I was able to find something that worked for me, and it opened my spirit where I could feel more connected to people. I could see the spirit in you. I could see the spirit in my family. I could see the spirit in people around me, and found ways to connect. And this is something that continues to evolve for me today. I feel more comfortable in a church now. I can go to services and things like that, but I will tell you, formalized religion has not been something that I've adopted to this day, but I'm open to it.
Mm.
I'm open to the teachings. I'm open to the wisdom. I'm open to the community. There are certain aspects of ritual that are appealing to me, but I've ended up being comfortable finding a place where I have a strong sense of a guiding wisdom that works in my life.
Well, and talk about, Karen, how the 12 steps invited you to that, or the power that you've seen in your own journey. I know
Mhm.
before we started this webinar officially, you were mentioning that you still do attend 12-step meetings
Yeah.
occasionally. So I'd love to have you share with us about the power of 12-step meetings in your transformative recovery journey.
Yeah. Well, one of the things about addiction and alcoholism, and it can be addiction from anything too, or to anything, is it's very isolating. You're very isolated in a sense of addiction. And there's a lot of shame for me, and I think for a lot of people. And so the importance of a program of some sort, and for me it was 12 steps. There's a lot of different programs out there, is it invites you to open yourself to other people, right? So you have other people in your life. I couldn't talk a lot in meetings. I was angry. I was furious, actually, and very filled with shame. I couldn't really talk in ways that I felt would be positive or well received, but I went and I sat and I listened. And that was huge for me. I started listening and relating in not so much to the lifestyle or what people had been through, but to the feelings and their inner experiences. And over time, I didn't even know this is what was happening, but it was reducing my sense of shame again. And it was chipping away at that sense of isolation. And because people were starting to be willing and open about sharing their experiences and their truth, it laid this foundation of trust in me over time that, well, I could probably start telling a little bit of my truth, right? And it broke down those walls. I have found that for me, this human experience that we're having was never meant to be carried alone, right? We break our hearts open so that we can find ways to connect to other people, and whether that path is through an addiction or alcoholism or shopping addiction or QVC or power, whatever it is, when we reach our breaking point, we think all is lost. It's those connections with other people that will pull us through. And that's the way it's supposed to be, right? We're like a beautiful rug that's being woven or a fabric that's being woven, and all of our stories come together and strengthen each other. And they bring beauty in the different sizes and shapes and colors and textures. It's all needed.
Yeah, that is so powerful. Well, so I want to shift a little bit, Karen. So you made this really powerful decision to share a lot of the most raw and real and painful parts of your history in a book.
Yeah.
And like, I'd love to have you talk a little bit about what initially inspired you to write the book. And then I also want to talk about how that journey has brought you to where you are today. So, for those who haven't read the book, um, I'll just say that Karen is so open and honest. She's honest about her upbringing, some stories about her childhood and early experimentation with alcohol, some really heart-wrenching situations in her early life with domestic abuse, with all the trigger warnings, all the things that you might read that are just unbelievable. And yet you had this resilience in your life, Karen, where you overcame that shame, you overcame your addiction, and you had this thriving career. And then you lived to write about it in a book. So yeah, so tell us about what that journey's been like for you to dig back into the past and bring those raw and real experiences to a format where people can read, identify with them, know they're not alone.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So I write about this in the beginning of my book. I knew from the time I was 4, I wanted to be an author and I wanted to be a writer. I could not think of anything more impactful than sharing stories, right? I was a reader from a very young age, and that was my world. That was my escape. And that's where I found, all kinds of adventure and joy. And I wanted to aspire to telling those stories. So here I am, years later, have not written the book. And the closest I got was to craft a career in technical writing, which felt safe to me because it wasn't really vulnerable. I was still writing, but it wasn't my stuff, so it felt safe, right? And that's where I really honed a lot of my writing skills. But there was a day when a friend of mine called me and said, "When are you going to write that book?" And I just turned 60, and I thought, oh my God, yeah, I'm not feeling it. I'm just not, I know I should. I'm just not feeling it. And she said, "You need to go on a writer's retreat." And I said, "Ooh, that's such a good idea." So I Googled writer's retreats and I find one and it was perfect. And I said, "Ooh, this is it. I'm going to go. Where is it?" "Oh, it's in Kenya." "Oh, well, okay. I'm going to go to Kenya this summer." So off to Kenya I went and began writing. And I thought, well, I have flown halfway around the world. And I told this group, I have flown halfway around the world. I will read my stuff out loud to you, as terrifying as this is, because if it's as bad as I think it is, then I will not run into you at Trader Joe's. I can pretend this never happened, right? So I built in this little bit of safety for myself. And this was the story that was demanding to come out. I really didn't want to write it. I thought, there's 1,000 recovery stories out there. Who needs another one? But it was like right here in my throat. It was demanding to come out. And I thought, well, I'll just write it. I will get it out of my system, clear the space, and then I'll write the important things that I think I really should be writing about, right? And I'm going to print it out, stick it in a drawer. My kids will find it when I die. I had no intention of anybody actually reading this. So I think that really freed me up a lot to just let the story lead me. I was just there along for the ride. I'm there moving the pen across the page, but the story took over, and this was the story that demanded to come out. Another important person in this journey was a woman who I've gotten to be friends with. Her name is Monica. And Monica said to me every time I wanted to quit, she said, "You know what? Women need to hear women's stories. Nobody wants to read from a celebrity. God bless the celebrities, and thank you for sharing your story. But women really want to hear about real women coming through these kinds of challenges. So you need to keep writing it." And she wouldn't let me quit. And then when I was done, I told my friend Sarah in South Africa, who I was writing with, she was the one that ran the writers retreat. I said, I think I'm done. And she said, great, now make a list of publishers. And I was shocked. I said, wait, what? And she said, this is going to be a book on shelves. And by that time, I felt like, well, it's complete. I guess it's going to go like it's going to go. And so again, I just went out on that trust with my sense of a higher power. This is the story you wanted me to tell. And I will just walk through this process one step at a time. And here we are. Here I am talking to you now about it. So there you
Yes. Yes. Well, let's talk about the title Bad Girls Club.
go. Yes.
What does that mean to you?
That's actually so a friend of mine, an old middle school friend of mine, found all us middle school girls on Facebook years ago. This was before the pandemic, and got us together for lunches. Most of us were still in the area, and so here we are. We're all us girls, and we were the ones that were drinking, after school. Sneaking pots, breaking into our parents' liquor cabinets, and when we were little, and doing all that kind of stuff. And we're laughing and we're talking. We haven't seen each other in, 35, 40 years, and telling stories and seeing who we are now as adults. And it was so great. They're like long lost cousins, right? And one of them said something like, oh, remember we got in trouble for this and we got in trouble for that. And somebody else said, yeah, we were such bad girls. And then somebody said we were the Bad Girls Club, and the name just stuck in my head, right? We were the Bad Girls Club back in the middle school and Key Intermediate in Springfield, Virginia. But a lot of us grow up with these hidden shadow parts of ourselves, the parts of ourselves that we feel a little ashamed about. And we may call ourselves, or think about ourselves as being bad girls. I shouldn't be, that's not good, right? I need to be a good girl. We're kind of raised in this framework of being good. When you're good, you're rewarded. It turns out we're just women, we're just girls, we're just human beings having human experiences. And for me, I've had this big transformation, not just in my recovery from addiction, but recovery in how I talk to myself and how I talk about myself, because I learned that how I treat myself really becomes the basis of how I treat other people. So if I'm not kind to myself, I certainly can't be kind to you in ways that are really meaningful. And if I'm going to judge myself harshly, there's a part of me that's going to judge you. And I don't want to be that person anymore.
Well, there's so much to unpack there. But one of the moments of the book that just I think is so unforgettable, and I think that what's so brilliant about the writing in your book is just how you can bring us into the experiences of your life.
Mm.
And in one scene, you describe some tequila bottles,
Oh, yeah.
all different tequila bottles, like around on a shelf or around the sink.
Yeah,
Is what
yeah,
I'm remembering.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And Karen and her friend took sips out of every single bottle to try to make it just seem like they were all the same, and then went and had a roast beef dinner.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I grew up on a little street in Springfield, Virginia. And one year, when I was about 11, we moved across the street. We moved to the Winters house. To this day, we still call it the Winters house, but Mr. Winter owned the house, and we moved into, and Mr. Winter sold my dad the house, and we moved across the street. And there was a family that moved into my old house. And they had a daughter my age and a son my sister's age. And our parents got to be close friends right away, and they liked to play bridge together. So we got into this routine where the parents would send us kids to one of the houses one night. They'd stay at the other house, play bridge and fix dinner, and then they'd call us and say, hey, come on over, it's time for dinner. So my friend Carol and I would babysit, the two little ones, and then we would just swap houses, So one night we'd be at their house, the next night we'd be at our house. So in my old basement, Carol's new house, they had lived in Mexico. They were on a foreign service assignment and had collected all these tequila bottles. And I remember sitting back looking, you know, if we took one sip out of each one of those bottles, no one would be able to tell that anything in it, the levels would stay the same. And so we just did it one day, one night. And my mom called and said, it's time for dinner. And by that time, we were absolutely fallen down drunk and giggling our heads off. And we always giggled anyway. So my dad just said, well, there they go, giggling again. But I found that was the moment, that was really my first drink. I found like not everybody's experience, but a common experience with alcoholics. And I joke that, the legal drinking age for Irish Catholic alcoholics is 12, so that was when I entered into it. Is that it fixed me. It fixed something in me. I felt stronger, more confident. I knew what to do. I felt empowered, and I was off to the races.
Yeah, well, what an amazing gift that you've given to all of us to be able to read and relate to your stories. And so we talked a bit about what this book is doing now in your journey. So you had been working at Salesforce in this corporate career, you were working on the book. And when you were working on the book, you had no idea that you would choose to leave your corporate career. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about professionally and personally how the message of the book is finding its way into the life that you're now living.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you for that. At first, when I began the book journey, it felt like a one-off project. It felt like, this was something that I needed to do for myself, and it was the story that needed to come out. And I didn't really see an immediate connection. But as my post Salesforce career has developed, the book and my career, my purposes all kind of come together. And what this is really about for me, it's a story of transformation. You can really almost look at it as like an allegory, right? That whatever brings you to your knees or brings you to a place of truth within yourself, you can choose to transform and use that as a pivotal moment to create the kind of life you want for yourself. And that's really the message. It's the message about transformation. I'm seeing right now, when I joined Salesforce, which I loved. I loved my career at Salesforce. I absolutely admire and adore so many of the people that work there. I mean, that's what just kept me fed for so long. Um, on so many levels. The work they're doing is tremendous. And when we started there, when I started there, we were really rallying around the message of the business of business is to improve the state of the world, right? And I've seen over the past few years, tech is really kind of pivoting away from that message in some ways. And tech really has taken on a powerful presence in our life from every level, from government on down to kids, right? And every level in between. And there is a hunger, there's almost this unbridled, unchecked, voracious hunger for profit and power at all these levels, right? And it almost seems like it's at an addictive stage, right? It's power at all costs, it's profit at all costs. We're seeing this happening now with mass layoffs, with things like people reporting quiet cracking, with people feeling stuck. The economy and the job market is such that they don't feel empowered to make a change, but they're feeling a very deep, desperate pull to do something more meaningful in their life, but they may be feeling powerless to make that change now. These stories of transformation, I think, are more needed and more important today than they ever have been. And I think the application of spiritual principles are incredibly needed and being called for today, right? I used to take what I learned in 12-step programs and just apply it to my teams as a leader at work. For example, one would be right out of the 12 traditions, our common welfare comes first. So our common success is going to come first if we rally around what it is that we're trying to accomplish. What is our purpose here today? What do we need to come together around? What are the principles that we can embrace to help us kind of define this work and how we're going to relate to each other and interact with each other? There's a lot of spiritual principles from the program, just starting with the basics: honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. When I first came out of rehab and I sat down with the sponsor, she said there's this thing called how: honest, open-minded, and willing. You don't have to be all three of those at once, but pick one and start there. And I was willing. I was willing. I was willing to try anything. I was willing to listen. I was willing to give something a try just for today, right? And that's where I started. Well, that applies directly to my leadership and anybody's leadership, really. How honest can you be with yourself? How willing are you going to be and open-minded to listen to feedback from others? Are you willing to pivot on your ideas? Are you willing to surrender your vision for the greater good of all? There's a lot in here that I think tech can learn from and business can learn from. And that's how the book, the message, the transformation is starting to come together for me in business.
Amazing. So we are going to pause for a moment. We're going to be back for some more conversation, but I do want to take a moment to let people know about how they can learn more from and engage with you and your work, Karen. So the Bad Girls Club's been out for several months now, and you can buy it at all major online retailers as a paperback, right? An ebook and an audiobook. Yes, all three formats are available. If you have read and enjoyed the book as I have, you can leave your review on Amazon or Goodreads, and those reviews will help other readers to discover the book. If you would like to, Karen is available as a speaker for events of all kinds, or if you happen to have a podcast, she would love to be invited to talk about the topics in her book, the topics of her work. You can follow Karen on LinkedIn and Instagram. You can also sign up for her newsletter. And when you sign up for her newsletter, which I have done, in fact, I've told Karen this, and I'm not just like, I don't know, trying to suck up to you or anything, Karen. Karen's is one of the newsletters that I regularly open because she has like wonderful insights to share. And in addition to hearing her insights, you also get to know about the types of programs that she's now offering. So I hope you'll go to Karen's website and sign up and receive her newsletter. And of course, get the book. Um, because hopefully I have shared enough that you're intrigued to hear more of her amazing stories. So we do have some time to take some questions from those of you who have attended, and thanks to those who are telling us that you've either read the book and loved it or that you're ordering it now. Thank you for that. I'll watch the chat for any questions, and then in the meantime, I have some questions I'm still dying to ask. So I'm going to ask mine, and I'll watch for questions in the chat as well. So Karen, you talked about the power of in recovery learning to love, respect, and accept yourself. And I'm wondering for those who might be listening who might struggle with that, what recommendations do you have about some practices or approaches to work on that self-love?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And boy, we need it more than anything. There's a couple different paths in, right? I had found at the near the end of my Salesforce career that I was burning myself out. And in my case, it was because my youngest had returned to college and I knew he was at the tail end of his college and I was facing the all my feelings around having an empty nest and I didn't want to face that, so I just dove into work, right, and burned myself out. So one of the first ways that I returned to a sense of self-love and self-care was by giving myself permission to rest. And that is key. We are all carrying so much right now, whether we realize it or not. Just being alive on this planet at this time in our history, our country's history, our personal history, our global history, there's a lot. There's a lot. And you almost need to insulate yourself behind walls of pink cotton candy, as my sponsor used to call it, to insulate yourself away from hearing just the constant onslaught of what we're witnessing today. That's huge. It's huge. It's taking up so much brain space just to manage that and to manage how much we take in, how much doom scrolling do we do, how much news do we listen to. So giving yourself permission to rest will help reset some of those brain patterns, will help reset our sense of safety, will help calm down our parasympathetic nervous system, and open the door for giving ourselves permission to do other things that are helpful to care for ourselves. So the basics. One of the things they taught me in rehab was don't get too hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Well, I was all those things all the time. I've passed through times in my life where I was all those things again. So I always go back to the basics. Am I hungry? Am I angry? There's ways I can deal with my anger. Right now, what really helps me is making bad art. I love making bad art. I made bad art the other day. I just pulled out, I was feeling funky, pulled out a pad of paper and took some charcoals out and just scribbled like a 2-year-old. It was amazing. Really helped. Get in your body. Do some yoga, lift some weights, take a walk, go outside, breathe some actual air, right? All of these ways are methods where you can begin to access caring for yourself. And when you begin to care for yourself and you can create enough space, you can start listening to, how am I talking to myself? What's the self-talk that's happening here? Am I driving myself hard? Am I being kind? Would I say this to my best friend? Would I treat my dog like this? If any of those answers are no, that's something you may want to look at.
Mhm. Thank you, Karen. Those are some powerful suggestions. So I do see a question from Laura. So she's asking, what are recommendations if you want to start a discussion group? And I assume you mean of the book. Should they be open to all kinds of addictions or only certain addictions?
Oh my goodness. I am of the, so I'm going to preface all of this by saying I am not a professional. I'm not a medical professional, of any sort. So everything you hear here is Karen's opinion about the nature of addiction. I think addiction is addiction is addiction. I don't really care what flavor you have. There's going to be commonalities around the feelings. So for me, recovery really takes a look at the inner experience versus the outward symptoms. So my outward symptom might be shopping, or it might be the acquisition of wealth at the expense of everybody else, or drinking, after everybody else has gone to bed and hiding the bottles, right? Whatever it is, that's just the surface level dirt. Let's just scrape all of that aside and let's get down to what's really going on inside someone. That's where you're going to find the commonality. I think I'm of the opinion that you can open it up to any kind of addiction as long as people feel safe, right? There's got to be confidentiality. There's got to be an understanding that what stays in the room stays in the room. There's got to be some sort of boundaries around it. And that's why some organized groups like the 12-step format, like Rational Recovery, other groups that are out there, they kind of bake that in and they've already done that legwork of establishing that stuff. So that can be helpful. I also will offer to you, I've got a book discussion guide on my website you can download. So there you go.
Thank you, Karen. And I do have a note here from Tracy in the chat. I'm imagining you're not seeing it, so I'll read it to you. And
Thank you.
so encouraging. She says, thank you for sharing your journey with us. Losing family to mental illness and
Mhm.
addictions makes this personal. The journey to being healthy and clean is not easy. And it's those individuals like you that will show that those challenges are very difficult, but it is possible. And I think, like, who among us doesn't have some part of our life that's been touched by these types of stories or journeys?
No, every place I go, I was at a Chamber of Commerce event the other night, just chit-chatting with people. And they said, oh, I heard you wrote a book. What's your book about? And I told them, they said, my cousin, brother, sister, colleague, manager, you name it, everybody knows somebody who is suffering from something.
Well, yeah, yes. And Karen, you led people for a long time in your corporate career. I mean, I feel like as a leader, like there's always someone suffering
Yes.
in your workplace. You may not see it, but there's always something going on. And I think that kind of goes back to the whole idea of if we can learn how to treat ourselves with kindness and compassion, then we can hold that space and be compassionate to others.
Absolutely. I used to tell my boys growing up, I said, listen, nobody gets through life without life getting really lifey sometimes. And sometimes people get it early, like you guys did, I did. Some people get it in the middle when they think they're at the peak of everything. And then some people get it at the end, but if you've been through that passage, then you can hold the light for the people coming behind you. Right.
Hmm. So, Karen, what are some stories that didn't make it into this book that you think might inspire those who are listening with us today?
Ooh, that's a good one. Wow. Um, the book really covers the first 10 or 12 years of my process, my recovery process. There's a whole lot that happened after that. I'm coming up on 40 years of recovery next month in October. And there's a lot of changes and permutations that have happened since. Um, I think I didn't want to spend too much time talking about what it was like. They in 12-step models, when you share your story, you follow this pattern of what it was like, what happened, what it's like now, right? And so I didn't want to spend too much time in the what it was like, even though those are some crazy stories and they're compelling. Um, there's a few from the what it was like kind of era. Like one time I got really burned out at work, and so I became a barmaid for like 8 months in Georgetown in DC, and I worked at this bar called Crazy Horse. It was sort of a biker bar, and there was somebody getting thrown through a front window, at least once a month, and it was kind of rough. And I met these guys one night, and they were skydivers, and I gave them my number. And then the next day they called me and said, "Hey, want to go to Canada?" And I said, "Sure. I'll go to Canada." And so they pulled up at 4:30 in the morning, and I jumped in their car and off to Canada we went to go skydiving. We were looking for this place called an iridium. And an iridium at the time is like the iFly places now, but back then there were only 5 in the North American continent. And they were these hollowed out barn silos, and they put like a DC-4 engine prop in the bottom of it, padded it up on the inside, put a trampoline base in, and you could buy time to practice skydiving. So we just smoked a lot of dope, drove up to Canada, and threw each other around this iridium. And then they went skydiving, and I chickened out. But I had no, I just met these guys. Like oh my God, thank God I didn't have daughters, because just thinking about the things that I did back in the day, I had all the faith in the world that nothing bad would ever happen to me, and a very high risk tolerance and poor judgment. So I think I just had a lot of angels around me for a long time.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Um, so maybe now, Karen, I happen to know that you have another book that you're working on. Would you
Yes.
be willing to give us a sneak preview of it?
Yes, so one of the things that, when you write in software, you don't write something end to end, right? You're writing in teams. And after I left Salesforce and I wrote this book, which was a great experience for me, but I realized I really missed collaborative writing. So I tapped a friend of mine, Donna Coxon McRory, who is writing from France right now as we speak. I tapped her one day and I said, "Hey, you ever thought about writing a book?" And she said, "Why, as a matter of fact, I have, but I've never done it." And I said, "Well, I have. Let's do this together." So we are writing a book right now. I think we should be wrapped up this winter, about the kinds of transformations, again, that women face when they enter their 40s and their 50s. And, their kids may be getting ready to launch or are launching. Who knows what's going on with the relationship? Maybe it's intact, maybe it's changing. Maybe their relationship with work is shifting, and your body is just going ballistic on you and you have no idea why, and you think you're losing your mind, and all of this stuff is hitting you at once, and you're staring at the next 25, 30 years going, "Oh my God, now what do I do?" You know, it may have been years since you thought about what you wanted or who you were. And what do you have to give? And what do you want to make of these next decades facing you? So Donna is a powerhouse in women's health tech, women's health legislation in California. I am so excited and honored to be partnering with her on this. And you're going to see if you follow her blog, you will see her dropping some writing. We're starting to put some of the writing out. And I'm very excited about this topic.
You have
About
a working title?
we do. It's called the Third Curve Remix.
The Third Curve Remix. All right. So we do have another question in the chat for you,
Yay.
Karen. What are recommendations if you want to share your experience with women in your organization to put in place something more formal? Not
Mm,
exactly sure what you mean by that, Laura. Do you mean like a formal way of sharing your experiences? Or if you can clarify, that would be helpful. Or
yeah.
Karen, if you want to take a stab at it,
Uh,
providing support.
Providing support. Okay. Yes. So, I had a very fortunate experience of becoming a manager of a new team right as the pandemic broke. And I had a very small team, right? And I could see that people were suffering. Um, and I wanted to find a way to offer support, in every area, especially around mental health and anxiety and depression kinds of things. One of the things that I found really helpful, Laura, is I took a course through my county called Mental Health First Aid, and that gave me a lot of language to use that was very practical. And I learned that it is okay to just call a spade and come right out and talk frankly and honestly with people. And so during a team meeting, I broached the subject and I opened with listen, kind of like what Becky did today, with honoring what everyone is carrying today and the significance of this date in our history, acknowledging, yes, this is a hard time for people. There may be things on your mind. I want to let you know that I see that. I hear that. I will make space for it. And we can spend some time talking in this open forum about it, or we can spend time talking one-on-one, or if you prefer a different kind of format, we can accommodate that too. So I think it's again coming at it from an open heart with the intention of being of service to those around me, right? And making it accessible, letting people know that I'm available and giving them the empowered way of choosing what they want to share and how they want to share. That was important to me.
Thank you for that, Karen. And thank you to all of you who have joined us today. I'm going to one more time remind you of some ways that you can stay connected to Karen. Of course, you can order the book, print, ebook, or audio book. We would be so grateful for your reviews on Amazon and Goodreads. Karen is a fantastic speaker for your next event or guest for your podcast. Stay connected on social media and subscribe to Karen's newsletter. So, Karen, as we wrap up this amazing hour together, it's been so much fun. I never liked anything more than throwing out the prepared questions and just having a conversation.
Yes.
And so I'm wondering, Karen, if you have any parting thoughts to leave our attendees today with some inspiration.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I see in organizations, especially we spend a lot of our time at work, right? And working with others, whether it's through our communities or through formalized roles in a workplace, we're undergoing some major shifts right now. First, people are really craving authentic leadership. They want to hear leaders who are coming from a human perspective, right? And so that can be bolstered when leaders do their own inner work. It gives you the foundation, it gives you the freedom to just be open and fearless about being who they are and being vulnerable and open with others. So I think that's the first thing that I see happening. Second thing, you know, organizations are learning how to navigate, change without being addicted to control, right? We are seeing a lot of different expressions of control coming back down with a lot of RTO initiatives coming back down where people feel like they're losing choice over their lifestyles or how they work. Um, Organizations can grow through that by, embracing inclusive practices. I've got a couple of workshops, for example. One is called From Cocktails to Mocktails. How do you navigate workplace events as a sober or sober curious person? And how can event designers and event planners create that inclusive space for people from all walks of life to feel comfortable. Another one is creating trusted cultures to help unlock those kinds of safe, comfortable spaces for people at work. And why is that important for organizations besides just the feel good factor? Teams work faster and innovate more easily when there's less friction. So create that trust, invest in creating that trust. Third, executive leaders are recognizing that their personal transformations affect their organizations directly. It's through their vision, it's through their alignment, it's through their expression of integrity, right? It's becoming values based over profit. So really, I think that I want to extend an invitation to anybody. If you are leading a team, if you're an organization, or if you have a need where you want to kind of explore some of these topics, if you want to start shifting the paradigms of fear-based power, um, if you realize that what your practices are doing are not really serving your entire organization anymore, just give me a call. Let's reach out and talk together about this. We can always make a change in ourselves and in our lives and in our communities as long as we're still breathing, right?
Amazing. Thank